Welcome to Personal Mastery Training. I'm your host, Alvin Brown, former world class athlete turned entrepreneur and consultant. Join us as we learn from guests who have conquered their inner battles and share their journeys to success. Get ready for inspirational masterclasses and thought provoking strategy sessions to fuel your path to personal mastery. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Personal Mastery Training. Always good to connect with my alliance here and you, the audience, and share thoughts. We don't own these thought. We don't own the power over these thoughts. We don't claim to be authorities on these thoughts. We just want to throw something out there so you, the listener, can just think, ponder. In today's age, it's nice to stop. There's so much information out there. We are drowning in information. But here's what we're not drowning. We're starving though in wisdom and application of this information in our lives. So that's what personal mastery is about, is satiating you a little bit to think about some conversations. And today, I want to throw to the alliance and to you, the audience, this idea of emotional maturity. And the idea behind it is this. There's some people in your lives, when you think about it, who you've known for maybe they're family members, or maybe they're friends you've been associating with forever since your childhood, but you're still hanging out with them. But God damn, they have not grown emotionally. They lack emotional connection, emotional quotient to read the room. It's it's a subtle version of narcissism in a way, where you have a moment where you need them to listen or to be there for you, and they're not available. They can't be. And this is what whole there's things I did when I was younger that were a tribute to my age and my level of development. But now in my 50s, I hope I'm able to not do those things and to show up and to show some maturity from my friends, my family, people close to me as a business leader. I'm able to read the room, to assess when my person my that works for me needs that support. That's what leadership's about. How do we help the people in our organization to show up as their best selves? And today's world, with social media, and again, we're drowning in information. It's becoming more and more apparent that not enough people are stopping to introspect a soundbite, a clickbait, especially with AI today. So I want to throw this conversation out about emotional maturity. And this was sparked by talking with someone whose person is in AA. And they said that their person continues to behave, even though they're getting older, they seem to behave like an adolescent still. But they brought up the point that whenever the alcoholism began, that person gets stuck in that same time in their life. And it makes sense because they numb themselves away from, because part of growing as a person involves being vulnerable, involves facing some dirty, dark secrets, facing some things you're not happy about, and it's painful, but you go through it. And from it, you should grow. But some people, they numb themselves, whether through some addiction, and they never grow through it when you think about it. So they get stuck at, say, 20, 18, 16, and now they're 36, 46, 56, and they are still, because they've never allowed themselves to grow through it. And if you don't grow through it, how are you going to mature? So now they're doing things and they're ruining their own relationships and they're ruining personal, professional relationships because they haven't allowed themselves to grow through. But then you remove alcohol and you think about it in someone else's life, and they're still doing that. They're not, unable to continue good relationships because they're still stuck in their own. They haven't allowed themselves to emotionally grow. They haven't allowed themselves to be emotionally vulnerable. to clean out the closet in a way. So I want to throw that out there. Um, the whole conversation is how do we allow ourselves to emotionally grow, and what does it look like when someone doesn't show up emotionally? I'm gonna put that out there to the alliance, and then we'll do the round table, we'll cook up a nice meal for the soul. All right, here we go. Who wants a piece of that?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. It's the vulnerability is something that we have to, I think, as human beings, really walk toward and be open to, right? And it's not necessarily just going to happen organically or by chance. We've got to walk towards that and we've got to practice it, right? The things you're talking about there, Alvin, showing up for others emotionally, when they need us, being able to read the room, um, having the ability to share our feelings articulately. It's not going to happen by chance. We have to really grow into that through practicing it, right? And I just read a story online the other day. It was on LinkedIn, and it was such a beautiful, and someone had shared it, and it was a beautifully written piece, and it was from a father to his daughter who he'd lost due to suicide. And it was so beautifully written, this note to her, right? But my thought was, man, it would have really been great on the other, for her to hear that when she was still alive, right? And I don't know all the circumstances, obviously, and that kind of thing, but I think, being a dad with daughters, um, in my younger days, and even sometimes to this day, but in my especially my younger days, not having that emotional skill set to show up for my daughters in a way that they needed me. Right now, I've got some years, some wisdom. I've worked at it, right, and so
Bingo. Beautiful.
I can have that conversation and be helpful and have meaningful conversation with them, in a way that they need, right? But before, I did not have that skill set. I had to develop it. So it's really something that we have to be intentional about developing. With that, I'll pass the mic.
That's beautiful. That's a perfect example I'm talking about right there.
It is beautiful. It's true. And it's been a while back, guys, but I told you about a book, an audio book that I bought and that I was listening to with my son, actually. A book from Jocko Willink. It was called The Way of the Warrior Kid. Okay. And that book was a very special book because it was all about leadership, but all about emotional maturity when I think about it. Okay. And the first version of the book, just for the people who don't know, it was about this, what they call a wimpy kid. And in the matter of a summer, he wanted to turn them into a warrior kid by teaching him certain principles, having him do certain things. So my son really loved the book and ended up, kind of creating his own little warrior kid ethos. That's really the goal of the book in the end. But a second book came out, okay, and I just got it. And the second book is called Mark's Mission. And that's where emotional maturity comes in. And it's very interesting because, again, in this first book, it's about teaching you the principles. In the second book, it's about life when your mentor, when your leader isn't there. Okay, you're really on your own and you have to apply these things. And how the whole story starts, I won't give the whole spiel to everyone, but just like it happens at school every single day for certain kids, is that there's one kid who's a bully, but now it's not physically, it's with words. Okay. And he keeps telling Mark that he has a big round head. And Mark gets really, really mad because now he knows how to fight. Now he does different things, but he can't just rely on just physical, right? And he doesn't know what to do because the other guy tells him he has a big round head, and he gets really mad and he gets really sad and he's crying and all of that, all of that, all of that. And then he has a conversation with his uncle, and I'll get to the point really quick. But his uncle just asked him, "Do you have a big round head?" And he chuckles a little bit. And then Mark says, "Oh, no, I don't have a big round head." And then his uncle says, "Well, your head kind of looks big and a little round. It actually does." And he's like, "No, blah." And then his uncle just asks him, "Okay, look at yourself in the mirror and tell me, what do you look like right now?" Okay. So the kid goes to the mirror and looks at himself and tells himself, when he really looks at it, he's like, "Well, I'm crying and I'm all red and I'm moving and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. I kind of look like a baby, you know?" And then his uncle just lets him understand. And it's true because I have a little baby at home now. Babies don't know how to regulate their emotions. Okay. They don't know how to manage them. So what do? Okay. They scream, they yell, and that's how they react. Right. But once you grow up, when you get mature, you learn different tools. You don't have to act and look like that anymore. Okay. And a lot of adults never necessarily got that lesson, as we talked about. They never passed that threshold where they resort back to kind of looking like a little baby. And I say that it just being funny, but it's kind of true. So as you were both talking, guys, I just Googled maturity. What are the key elements to maturity? And here's what came out. It says self-awareness, so just looking at the mirror or understanding your emotions, good example. Second thing was emotional regulation, is having the ability to regulate, being the thermometer or a thermostat, as I believe it was Alvin that you talked about that. Responsibility. At some point, I have to take ownership for something. Google says self discipline, resilience, empathy, humility, patience, integrity, and last one, perspective. Okay, perspective. Having a bigger spectrum of what you're actually looking at so you can see things for what they really are. Okay, for what they really are, and not necessarily react. It's like if I walk in the street and some guy tells me I have a big round head and I know nothing about this guy, he knows nothing about my life. Okay, I could get all mad and get angry and get into a fight, and what would that do? Is that mature? Do I have the right perspective? Not at all. So for anyone who has kids, I highly recommend those books. They're great books with great lessons from a guy who's definitely well versed in like leadership and emotional maturity. Okay, so that's kind of one example I wanted to give. And right before we got into this conversation and we were developing in it, I'll go with one of these points, okay? The point of self awareness. I think it's so important to check yourself, okay? To give yourself a moment in life where you can check yourself. And I love just the process of personal mastery because true power, it's not control over others, it's control over yourself. Okay. And checking yourself allows you to do that. It's so important to develop these things and this moment of self-reflection um, built into our lives because it brings us back to the truth. And Alvin, you started off asking two questions. So, what does it mean to emotionally grow? I believe is that it is when we display more self-awareness, is when we can regulate a little bit more. It's when we take more ownership. We have better perspective. We have more integrity, with who we truly are. And all these different key aspects that Google says about what maturity is. And lastly, what does it look like when someone does not show up with emotional maturity? That's your second question. Well, again, let's take this example that I gave when I first started out, just in our mind, of a baby crying. Well, that's what it that's what it figuratively looks like. It's grown men, grown women, grown adults, resorting to that when we are so much more. Okay, when we are so much more, that's kind of what it looks like. It doesn't bring any solutions. Okay, it doesn't fix anything, it doesn't make us feel good, and it doesn't fix the problem. Okay, that's the opposite of emotional maturity, the way I see it. I'm like, all throughout my life, I want to grow into the best, most authentic, strongest, most honest version of myself. Uh, Having the opposite of emotional maturity is the opposite of that. Okay, it's when my wife tells me a little thing that doesn't matter and I get all mad and all defensive. That's not being emotionally mature. Okay, it's when I get into an argument with a kid when I'm the parent. These are a great example that we can all see in our lives every single day, and we have the opportunity to be the opposite if we check ourselves proactively, read a book, listen to the Mastery Alliance, do things like that. Get up on Sundays, like we do, just to be here because it allows me to check myself. Don't go wandering around and get lost, right? That's the goal because I'm a human being just like anybody else. We are, and it can happen if we don't check ourselves and if we're not intentional and proactive about it. So with that, I'll pass the mic.
Yeah, great conversations, great conversation, and exactly what I was hoping to tease out in a practical example, Charlie, is that daughter, that man losing his, unfortunately, his daughter to suicide, and you know, again, we don't know why, and don't want to point fingers at anything, but I'm sure partly, he was probably going through, did I say the right words at the right time? Did I put things in perspective and so on and so on is, sure there's a lot of questions that he's going to go through, with himself and so on. Did he do enough? And, in a holding, I remember a while ago, long while ago, I learned a great lesson from my daughter. She, it was a scenario where she had some friends over and she was very young. And at some point she decided in front of her friends to start looking at making fun of her dad. And out of nowhere, guys, I see myself, I'm watching myself say something to my daughter that was unforgivable at the time, but I was in front of her friends. I wanted to embarrass her because I felt attacked by her with her friends. And I didn't even, I'm a grown man. But somehow, whatever she said, I had some old stuff lying and it somehow woke it up and bang. And, her and I talk about it all the time. That one, she's 26 now. And in 26 years, I had one blip. And that's a blip that was never, the words you say can stick with her. I mean, now I think it's not that grave to hang on still. We talk about it and we laugh. But what I'm getting at is these things were lying deep in my subconscious. And all it takes is one trigger and you are now, bang, the mastery's out the window, or you're at work and the coworker says something and all those time you built and you say the thing, and or you don't show up for somebody, a friend who is going through something, and you aren't able to read the room to know that the friend needed you at this time because you're so caught up with your own stuff. Or they're okay, he's all right. But he's you by now, as a friend, he doesn't want to bother you. But if you're able to read the room and really have that emotional EQ, your EQ is high, you get, I'm gonna force the issue here. I'm gonna push the issue. Or you could just again go numb and not show up for the person in front of you. So again, the emotional, some people like, so you mentioned uh that man showing up for his daughter. I'm sure right now, if he, again, I don't know the story behind it, but one thing I know for sure, for me, as I grow, with my people at work, and now as I get older with my male friends, and able to say I love you, I truly love you, and show up, and they're showing up for me. It's amazing. I just went through some challenges, and the amount of men, and you know even having a mature relationship with a woman that is not your partner, being married and having a, I have so many women friends that I can actually say I love you, and they say they love me, but it doesn't lead to having need for sex or to move it forward anymore. So it's that maturity level of being in the candy store and able to walk out and not having to think that everything leads back to they must want this. See, that's that level of maturity. I have a friend, very close friend, who just can't make that decision. Everybody wants him, and it's not that way. So that's that level of maturity. And so, Ray, you mentioned maturity, the word, the definition of it: self-awareness, emotional regulation, taking responsibility, self-discipline, humility, patience, having perspective. Those are, look, that sounds so easy. Self-awareness, emotional regulation, controlling your emotions, responsible. They're not hard words. You're not talking about things yet, but these are very, they might sound easy, but they're a lot of work. Vulnerability. You have to be vulnerable. You have to allow these things. These are the growth, humility, self-discipline, patience. So these are all things they sound easy, but they're not. There includes a lot of vulnerability, and as we know with humans, um, you said self-reflection, Ray. I remember one of my clients long time ago said she doesn't like to meditate. I said, why? She goes, I don't want to hear the noise and the conversations in my head. So she keeps everything's always loud, everything's always on. She's never allows a quiet moment for herself because she doesn't want to look back at whatever is hidden in there. You see, because that takes vulnerability, that takes some quote unquote pain to reflect back at that, to check yourself, to have self-reflection. Some people don't want to journal. They don't want to meditate. They don't want to do anything because they're afraid of the boogeyman in the closet. They're afraid of what's under the bed, and they don't want to do that reflection. It's amazing how I don't even know why we worry about what other people think. We're our own worst enemy. So if you can get through you, who else can hurt you? Because you know you so well. Of what your perception, anyways, it's not even true. Some of the stuff we have in our minds, we forget everyone's human, and everyone, to err is to be human, to forgive is divine, right? So this is where the work comes in, right? So being emotionally mature as a leader, as a partner, a father, a friend, this is why I brought this up. That's part of self mastery. Because as I said, as I went through my challenges in the last few months, I saw that people who could show up for me showed up in so many different ways, right? And even still, I have people who checking on me, checking on me, and making sure everything's good. See, that's all part of that maturity. That's all part of, hey, he must need something. Hey, this, that. So again, when you're not emotionally sure, what friend are you going to keep in the times when you need them? And who's going to show up for you when they realize, oh, well, when I needed it, I didn't hear her. So again, mastery. So I'll pass those points back to the group.
Yeah, this is such a great discussion. And one of the things that made me think of and listen to you both talk about it and the maturity and there's so many attributes, right, that are mentioned here. And they're all so good. And in my self-reflection last week, I was thinking about when I was growing up and my athletic career, and I was a really good American football player. But you know what? I showed up for practice. I practiced really, really hard, but that's not enough. And played in the games, but that's not enough. There's a lot of time I spent in the weight room out that was away from the field. There's a lot of time I spent running hills that was away from the field. A lot of time I spent running around a lake that was not too far from my house that was not with practice. So when we go through life and we're just going through our day-to-day and our work and our interactions, that's if we really want to master this and become emotionally mature, it's not enough just to have those human interactions. We've got to go further. We got to go outside. We've got to read books. We've got to have conversations, right? And then through the practice and assimilation of information, we'll gain the understanding and how to utilize these tools to their best effect. But when I was thinking about my career, those principles that I applied to football, I didn't apply to basketball. I tried to, hey, we have these 2-hour practice, and then, okay, I'll be here tomorrow. That's not enough to be a great basketball player. To be a great basketball player before practice or after practice, take your pick, you need to put up about 500 shots, right? Outside of practice, every day, 500 shots, right? and and so how many people do that, or dribbling through the cones or doing all the things they need. So it's so interesting that I listened to a couple of guys talking about Kobe Bryant. And, he had this reputation for not wanting to pass the ball, right? Oh, Kobe's not going to pass it. He's taking all these shots. When someone asked him about it, he said, why don't you pass the ball? These guys said, I don't trust them. Why don't you trust them? He says, because I see what they do. They're not here before practice. They're not here after practice. They're doing the minimum. So no, I don't trust them. I'm not passing. You're not putting in the work. So think about this. When we put in the work, when it comes to this emotional maturity and being able to showing up for people, people are going to trust us with their feelings, right? People are going to trust us with their emotions because they know, man, the way we show up, we're putting in work. We're not just talking about things, we're walking our talk. And so if we put in the work, people will trust us enough to build these deep relationships because they know that we're going to honor who they are, where they are. So with that, I'll pass the mic.
Both of you touched on really cool things. I'll start off with you, Alvin. When you talked about that client who didn't even want to meditate because she didn't want to kind of be stuck in the noise in her own head. I had clients saying the same. And what I wrote down is it's so important to allow for these things to happen. Okay, human nature is that we resist. We do absolutely everything that we can, as we know the brain's very efficient. It doesn't want to put us in situations that may seem harmful, so we resist. But in reality, okay, greatness isn't necessarily created. It needs to be given a way to simply happen. And oftentimes it's just removing ourselves from ourselves. That's really what it is, getting out of the way, letting it happen. That sounds counterintuitive for us, but that's such a powerful point that I'm keeping. for me, where oftentimes it's just simply letting things happen in the way that they should happen. Sit in it, okay? Sit in it, learn from it. And Charlie, I love when you go back to the football analogies because, again, different places, different times, but everything you say, I can feel it. I can feel it because uh, I've lived it, so you have a different perspective. You understand what that means, right? What that means. Uh, when you look at that, let me just go back to my notes now because I just rounded down. Okay, perfect. So skill transfer, okay? Skill transfer is such an important thing and compounding growth ultimately because everything you did in the track, everything you did in the weight room transfers somewhere else. Okay. It transfers somewhere else. It builds trust because you've put in the work, not only for your teammates, for your coaches to put you on the field, but for yourself. Okay. Before you even been in this situation, you understand that you're prepared for it. Okay. And that leads to compounding growth. I think it's amazing, and I'm sure it happens to you guys in everyday life, and to most people who are really, really committed and doing the work. Where I'm put in certain situations professionally that maybe I haven't done a certain thing before, okay, or I haven't been in a specific situation, but I have complete trust. I'm really comfortable that the result is just gonna get done. Why? Because so many other skills transfers from other places. Okay. I haven't been in this situation, but I've been in A, B, C, D other situations where I learned the skills and the growth compounded in a way that I can bring something totally different than anybody else in this particular moment. And I think that's so awesome when we go back to like the key elements of just maturity, just like Kobe Bryant, okay? If you really, really dive in, okay, to let's say integrity, and when we talk about integrity for him, having integrity is I'm gonna show up every single day. I'm gonna work to the best of my ability. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. For sure, you're gonna get better in your perspective. Also, without even trying to work at it, your perspective is gonna elevate because when you put yourself in these moments, you learn. Okay, you grow. It compounds in other areas that you might not even know of. You have to be self-aware because when you put yourself through these workouts, you know your mind's talking to you. Okay, your mind's telling you, okay, this is crazy. No, I'm leaving. You have to have discipline. You have to take ownership. It's not another man to tell me that I'm gonna do this if I say I want to be the best. What does being the best requires? It requires me to be resilient right now. It requires me to have empathy, also understanding that, hey, I'm gonna miss that game winning shot and I can't totally beat myself up for it. I can learn from it. I gotta give myself grace. You see how it compounds in everything else. And I think that's awesome when, hey, if you feel like you can't do everything, pick one, do your absolute best. And naturally, you will get better at other areas because you will work at those other areas without even knowing it. It's going to build trust. It's going to build competency. Is that how you say it? Yeah, competency. And you'll be able to replicate the results more consistently, which will ultimately altogether bring you to the next uh, level. So I think that's awesome also. And we just go back to the beginning. Always seems to be small things, as Alvin says. They don't sound too complicated, but they take work. And in the end, you just gotta commit to the work. You don't gotta be perfect. You commit to the work, you get better. That's for sure. It's how it works. It's simple math. You don't commit to the work, you get worse. And As simple as that. So with that, I'll pass the mic.
Yes, great points. Great points. And as you're talking, Ray and Charlie, what came to me is this idea of, you know, when we talk about the EQ, and I'm thinking about our transition in through life, there's certain things that teenagers that we should do, and there's certain things in our lives that works on our mental state. Like when you were young in a group, you don't want to be ostracized. So people make fun of you. Oh, what are you? And they do whatever they can to draw you back into the group. And there's things where you're complaining because you didn't get something at some point. Then you start to get more mature and you start making it about other people. Your egocentrism should reduce, and you start to think about others, uh, you know, and what others may need, and so on and so on, and not to just use it to leverage it, but because you really do care. But as we get older, 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, every decade, let's go decades. There's got to be some level that, those things don't work on you as much anymore. Someone teasing you because you didn't do this thing, or you're afraid of a group of people who's going to ostracize you because, you did this thing that was against the culture of what you do, and so many reasons. So, as you're talking about with the football and the practice, and now you transfer of skills, and at some point in our lives, we have to every decade we should really do some introspection and how have I grown emotionally, and how do I measure that? Well, I measure that by I'll even go and here's a great example. And when I was going through the challenges, and this is why this reflection hit me. You know, Charlie, Brandon, Ray, Ray made a trip. I think it's a 4 or 5 hour drive. Took his kids, made a day out of it to come to this event I was having, that was in support. Charlie, I thought he was going to jump on that plane the way he showed up, and even while I was going through the challenges, they held it down for me. Showed up here consistently. See, those are all mature emotional years. The people, those who choose not to grow mature in emotionally, will just he's off. He's not showing up, so I'm not going to show up. I'm gonna have a couple more. Good. I'm gonna have a couple more hours sleep and so on and so on. Or it's too far. Something, something, something. I had a young guy who's only this guy is only 20 odd years old, and the level of emotional maturity that I saw during that time, and I looked at some people who are 4 decades older than him, 5 decades older than him, who did not show that same maturity. It's so that's what made me start thinking about, are you growing emotionally as the decades go on? Aging is inevitable, but growing mature and growing wisdom is an option. And so these are the conversations that you want to have. The person you're with, the company you're with, are they there supporting you? Are they still holding on to old belief systems, old isms that are keeping you also stunted and lack of being vulnerable? Because around them, you don't want to show that because they're either gonna tease you about it, or maybe you're playing small, so they won't feel insecure around you. So there's so many ways that this shows up. So that's how I kind of want to bring that together, is start to do some introspection in your own circle, and look at your own growth. Are you struggling to be vulnerable enough? And as we get older, vulnerability is essential. It becomes essential as a father, as a mother, uh, or brother. Some people are still fighting with their siblings over old stuff. And one of them is not able, or both are not able to be vulnerable enough to say, "Hey, I'm sorry, man. You know what?" And maybe they weren't, maybe you were right, but there's a great wisdom that says sometimes it's better being kind than being right. Just to show that level of maturity. Because when that person's gone, you're gonna wonder what the argument was about. What was it about? So, with that, I'll pass that for a final wrap up.
Yes, this has been such a great time to reflect, and it's such an important topic for all of us, right? To just daily consider ways that we can continue to grow emotionally for ourselves and for others. And it's an amazing law that always states that when we help others, we help ourselves at the same time, right? It's impossible to help others without helping ourselves. And so when we're able to show up for others, then that really kind of fortifies who we are as human beings. And when our head hits the pillow at night, we know we're being the best that we can be. With that, I'll pass the mic.
Yeah, I said it last week. I'm gonna say it again. It's I'm in awe. I'm always in awe every single week for the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now that I've been here. I'm always in awe in the end, and I come out better. I'm grateful to be around great people, great men, and to share great messages that contribute to the lives of others. I think that's a awe-inspiring um, awe-inspiring thing. If I can think of one word today, I can think of many. I'll just go with integrity, you know, integrity, uh, knowing who you are. And I think it's a beautiful thing when you can project that to the world. It's true for you, but if you meet someone for the first time, whether they know you or whether they don't know you, do they have a clear sense of like who you are, uh, what truly matters to you? I think that's a special thing, and I'm grateful to have just this opportunity to try to do good. Okay, maybe selfishly for me, but at the same time for as many people as possible. So
Amen.
yeah.
Amen. My word I'll finish off then with is vulnerability. Is being vulnerable enough to grow. You're not, whatever age you're listening to this, you're not, 10 years, a decade earlier. Let that go. Let go of if it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't make sense, sometimes something you do have to let go of. The person you may not be wanting to hang around them, so I'm not going to leave that, generalize that. Sometimes it's healthier to let that go. However, do some introspection and look at the reason why that you are in this conflict. And if there's some part that you can do to squash it, to be kind than being right. Maybe you are right, but is it worth it? Something to think about. So vulnerability.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's the self-awareness and really understanding where you are so that you can see more clearly where you need to go, right? And self-awareness is so key to growth because if you're self-aware enough to know, hey, here's where I'm lacking and here's where I can really focus to improve, you can do that. But if you're not self-aware that you need to grow in your emotional maturity, it's kind of hard to grow, right?
Yeah,
So self-awareness, I think, is key.
awesome. Love it. Let's see, we're going so great. All right. So that's it, everyone. Thank you guys for another great Alliance meeting. We hope we served our listeners. We hope you remember. I'm going to repeat what my mentor said to me. One idea, well executed, can change your life forever. So, what one idea that sparked you that you can share? Remember also to like, subscribe, and share this information. And what one idea from this? My hope is that what we said allows you to go and patch up an old friendship that somehow died because there was some 20-year-old beef that happened when you were 20 or 30, that at that maturity level you weren't able to let it go. And then it turns into be this fruitful relationship that should have been a lifelong one that you've now cut off. So that's the goal. All right, everybody. As we say when we're getting out of here, we want to wish you a whole lot of peace. We're going to give you some
Um,
love, but with a sprinkle of soul. All right. Until next week, everybody. Peace and love. We're out.